Behind the Iron Curtain of the last century lay numerous secrets, and the mysterious events that unfolded over the course of 50 years are considered by many to be links in one chain. The crash of a UFO, aerial dogfights, and reverse-engineered alien technologies at the most secretive military base of the former Soviet Union, Kapustin Yar, constitute this chain. There is an opinion that it was at this base in 1948 that an extraordinary event occurred. Suddenly, a cylindrical craft appeared above the most classified Russian facility. Joseph Stalin, who showed interest in crashed flying objects, was aware of the events. One of the witnesses claims, "I know that UFOs visited Kapustin Yar. This place was at the top of the list of monitored sites. What lies behind the barbed wire at Kapustin Yar?" For the first time, classified reports about this alleged crash of an unidentified object are being revealed. The question is whether these events helped the Soviet Union in researching technologies and if they won the space race. One of the experts notes, "I am sure the Russians did everything possible to replicate technologies that could have come to them from the Americans, Germans, or even from aliens." Listeners will be able to hear recordings from the air of this ultra-secret Soviet base for the first time. Aerial photographs of Kapustin Yar have never been shown before. Let us take a look into the deep bunker of the UFO Research Center at Kapustin Yar, where the most unusual objects were buried in the ground. This is a kind of secret within a secret. The incident that occurred at Kapustin Yar in 1948 remains a mystery of the Soviet era, an event that UFO researchers still refer to as the Russian Roswell. This is Kapustin Yar, one of the ultra-secret sites located approximately 100 kilometers southeast of the former Stalingrad and 800 kilometers south of Moscow. Established by the personal directive of Joseph Stalin, Kapustin Yar became the oldest and largest Russian military facility of its kind. Over the last 60 years, conflicting rumors about what is happening there have circulated. Kapustin Yar was and remains the first Russian space launch site located in the Astrakhan region at the lower Volga. Vladimir Semyonov, who worked in the KGB for 26 years, recalls, "In Kapustin Yar, everything was completely secret. There was nothing unclassified there." Sergei Khrushchev, the son of the former leader of the Soviet Union, adds, "Less than a year after the news of the UFO crash in Roswell appeared in headlines around the world, there was also contact with a UFO and a crash of an alien ship at this Russian base." On the 19th of June 1948, early in the evening, according to reports from the air traffic controller monitoring the airspace over Kapustin Yar, a strange object appears on the radar screen. At the same moment, a pilot of a MiG, located 10 kilometers from the base, sees a large cigar-shaped UFO of silver color in front of him. The pilot transmits a message to the base that he has been blinded by an unusual bright beam. Russian pilots had encountered UFOs even before this time, particularly in 1948, and even attempted to attack, which led to significant troubles. There is a suggestion that by order of the commander-in-chief of the Soviet Air Force, Gagarin, the pilot pursued the UFO for almost 3 minutes before launching a missile that ultimately shot down the object. However, unlike Roswell, the report of this crash did not make it to the pages of newspapers. In 1948, a cylindrical object suddenly appeared over the secret base. MiGs take off in alarm, and an aerial battle begins. The Russian pilots demonstrate excellence in their actions. Imagine the scene. The aircraft is positioned directly above the unidentified object, the MiG fires all its missiles, and then a directed beam of particles explodes the aircraft. Reports suggest that the pilot, blinded by the beam, lost control of the aircraft or was shot down by the flying object using unidentified weaponry. The pilot perished. What weapon did the aliens use? What did they shoot with? Perhaps the Russians employed beam weaponry. The installations on the MiG fighter were a standard armament set of that time. The pilot fired from both machine guns and primitive rockets. However, somehow this MiG managed to penetrate the anti-gravity shell surrounding the unidentified object. The cigar-shaped craft could no longer remain airborne and crashed to the ground. This event stunned many. Russian search teams were thrilled when they managed to acquire the spacecraft. It was placed in underground bunkers in Zhitkara, and thus began the secret Russian program for the study of UFOs. Bill Burns, the publisher of a magazine about UFOs, noted that any country strives to acquire a flying saucer and its fantastic weaponry. Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist and ufology lecturer, added that the crash of 1948 was just one of many strange incidents that turned Kapustin Yar into a mysterious version of American Roswell and Area 51. The Soviet Union needed to have what the United States already possessed. They had a crash in Roswell, and they had technologies that were developed by the beginning of the 1960s. The Russians did not have this, and they were seeking ways to obtain it. The Russians were acquiring these technologies through dangerous operations, sending pilots of their MiGs on hunts for extraterrestrial spacecraft. This was considered a fair game. Since its establishment in the early 1940s, Kapustin Yar had been shrouded in a veil of secrecy. The best Soviet designers, scientists, and military specialists were sent there to develop secret Cold War technologies and weaponry. Sergei Khrushchev, the son of the former leader of the Soviet Union, shared that he spent months and years in Kapustin Yar, working on the testing of cruise missiles designed for Soviet submarines. Kapustin Yar was one of those sites whose photographs U.S. intelligence wanted to obtain first and foremost. There, 3 types of weaponry were tested: surface-to-air missiles, surface-to-surface ballistic missiles, and missiles that were launched in the air. All 3 types of weapons were concentrated in one location. The construction of the base was surrounded by the strictest secrecy. When the Soviet military decided that a small town located nearby was too close to the base, its population was evacuated, and the town itself simply vanished from the face of the earth. This town was called Jitkur. It was located just a few kilometers from the Kapustin Yar testing base. The Russians likely decided that it was better to eliminate the town so that its residents would not see what was happening. Many researchers believe that the name Jitkur was transferred to a classified underground center for UFO research located near Kapustin Yar. In Kapustin Yar and Jitkur, emergency unidentified flying objects and alien corpses were stored. Jitkur became the equivalent of Area 51 at Nellis Air Force Base on Groom Lake in Nevada. Different countries store UFO technologies in special classified locations and attempt to crack them to understand what they are and how they can be reproduced. However, long before the crash of 1948, the territory around Kapustin Yar and the sky above Russia were places where many other contacts with UFOs occurred, as detailed in documents. Some data dates back to times when the Soviet Union did not yet exist. Russia has a vast territory, and UFOs have been observed above it for thousands of years. Paul Stonehill, co-author of the book UFOs in the USSR, mentioned one of the most famous sightings made by the traveler Ibn Fadlan in the year 950 of our era. He and his companions noticed strange objects in the sky that greatly frightened them. The locals merely laughed at the rumors of mysterious celestial beings, claiming that such phenomena occur quite frequently. These events resembled battles from the modern film Star Wars. Legend has it that the thrilling aerial battles gave Arab warriors strength and courage to crush their enemies the next day. In the 17th century, there was a significant influx of UFO sightings in Russia. The objects described by witnesses resembled comets in the shape of fireballs. One such object appeared over one of the northern lakes. On the 15th day of August in the year 1663, a loud crash was heard from the heavens. From the clear sky, a huge fireball descended onto Lake Rob, preceded by 2 fiery beams. The sphere flew from the south to the west for a distance of about 500 meters before disappearing, but soon returned. It hovered over Rob Lake for an hour and a half, instilling terror in those who saw it. According to further accounts, fishermen were burned by the fire and flaming fish were thrown onto the shore trying to escape from the menacing sphere. Observations of fireballs in the territory of the Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation, were indeed very high. Approximately half of all sightings concerned glowing spheres or spherical UFOs. In the year 1892, another extraordinary spectacle occurred over Moscow. One of the eyewitness reports was published in the Russian newspaper Svet on the 17th of March. Beams of light directed straight down to the ground formed a conical bundle of the color of ordinary flame. These bright beams could be compared in intensity to street electric lamps. The point from which they originated remained stationary, and the beams were visible for 20 to 25 minutes. For centuries, the enormous fireballs that appeared over Russia could not be compared in scale and destructive power to the event of 1908 on the Tunguska River. According to one of the hypotheses, it was not a meteorite body, but an alien spacecraft. A massive object from the depths of space entered the solar system and pierced the Earth's atmosphere. The fall occurred in distant Siberia in 1908, causing a powerful explosion. On the 30th of June, 1908, at 7 o'clock in the morning, the sleeping forest of Tunguska was shaken by a deafening explosion that split the ground. Its power was comparable to that of 40 hydrogen bombs. Huge trees broke like thin twigs as the explosion ravaged the dense forest. The aftermath of this explosion was felt even in Western Europe. At first, no one doubted that a collision with a giant meteorite had occurred. However, some researchers expressed doubts. One of them, sharing his thoughts, noted, "Personally, I would not want to see this as a demonstration of what Mother Nature is capable of. There is no rational principle in what happened. It was not a rocket. It was not a bomb launched by aliens trying to show us that they are watching us, the Earthlings." Nevertheless, UFO researchers wondered, if this devastating explosion was caused by a meteorite, then why are there no craters in Tunguska or anywhere nearby? This fact has remained difficult for scientists to explain until now. Some referred to this event as an explosion, while others called it an implosion. Entire kilometers of taiga forest were destroyed, and the explosion itself caused changes in the magnetic field of our planet. Academic science, of course, adhered to the theory that the Tunguska body was nothing more than an ordinary meteorite that burned up in the dense layers of the atmosphere. However, there were many facts indicating that the body was making a purposeful, controlled flight. What could have caused such a level of devastation and yet not leave a crater? Modern UFO researchers suspect that the explosion in Tunguska was not caused by a meteorite fall. There is an opinion that Joseph Stalin linked this explosion to UFOs testing some experimental weapon. Stalin showed interest in gathering information to determine whether UFOs posed an immediate threat to the security of the Soviet Union. He invited a number of well-known scientists such as Sergei Korolev to help him form his own opinion on the matter. Korolev, one of the most famous Soviet scientists and the father of the Russian space program, set himself the task of unraveling the mystery of the Tunguska meteorite. He financed an expedition to the site of the fall, organizing a helicopter mission to the Tunguska area at his own expense. Despite the fact that Korolev never met Stalin, some researchers attempted to prove the opposite, but found no records or confirmations. Stalin apparently was already doubting that it could have been a meteorite and suggested that it was some kind of spacecraft. Researchers were supposed to find fragments if it truly was a ship and attempt to reproduce them for military purposes. Korolev discovered that many consequences of the explosion were still noticeable in Tunguska. However, the most shocking finding was the radioactive metal fragments at the explosion site, which were not characteristic of either asteroids or meteorites. The site of the Tunguska meteorite fall, if one continues the line of its movement, led to an interesting object that Russian amphibologists call the Devil's Graveyard. These are fields with a diameter of about 300 meters, where no plants grow and animals constantly perish. In the center is a large depression, a crater of about 50 meters. Here, the radioactive background is constantly elevated, and very incomprehensible things occur. There are legends that Korolev personally informed Stalin in a private conversation that the cause of the explosion in Tunguska was indeed a UFO, fragments of which are still scattered across the taiga. However, in his completely classified official report, Korolev provided a different explanation. The explosion in Tunguska was the result of the fall of a gigantic meteorite. It was important whether this information served the interests of the bureaucracy. If so, then good. If not, then this information simply does not exist. Some speculate that the radioactive debris from Tunguska was transported to the underground part of the Kapustin Yar base in Jitkur. Every country keeps UFO technologies in classified locations, and the Soviet Union primarily kept everything in Jitkur, where scientists tried to figure out what these technologies were and how to use them. The security around this base was at the highest level, up to and including shoot-to-kill orders. Were Stalin's scientists using the UFO fragments to develop their space program and the nascent missile defense system? At the head of this program were several individuals who truly advanced space science. Fred Kulik from the California Institute of Technology notes that the scientists of this program were directly subordinate to Stalin and later to Khrushchev. It is reported that in the pursuit of UFO technologies that could help win the space race against America, the highest military leadership of the Soviet Union ordered MiG pilots to shoot down unidentified flying objects, just as they had done during World War II. This occurred just before the crash in Russian Roswell in 1948. From that moment, they faced two problems regarding UFOs. The first was the desire to acquire new technologies in order to outpace others with their flight technologies. The need for constant combat readiness was critically important, as there was a threat that aliens might undertake something new. In the context of escalating tensions, the Russians had no choice but to send their pilots to intercept UFOs. With the spread of information that the wreckage from Tunguska and the 1948 crash were under investigation in Chitkura, Russia's opponents in the Cold War began to show increasing interest in what was happening above and below the secret military base. In 1950, CIA agents in the Soviet Union reported UFO sightings, which drew the attention of American authorities to events in the USSR. At the beginning of the Cold War, the Soviet military test site Kapustin Yar became a center of secret activities related to the development of the latest weapons and rockets. After World War II, when the atomic bomb was created, the Russians failed to develop compact nuclear weapons, which forced them to build large rockets for transporting heavy bombs. While the United States managed to reduce the size of bombs and rockets, the Russians continued to rely on large rockets, which also gave rise to their space program. In 1951, a disturbing document was found, reporting significant progress by the Russians in creating nuclear weapons and delivery systems over the past 18 months. By the early 1950s, rumors of UFO activity and experiments at Kapustin Yar began to leak beyond Soviet borders. This alarming news may have prompted the United States to determine whether the Soviet Union had acquired UFO technologies. Kapustin Yar and Chitkura became centers of attention for both Soviet and American military forces. While American military attention was focused on bases such as Area 51 and Los Alamos, Kapustin Yar was among the sites that U.S. intelligence monitored in Russia. This is confirmed by recently declassified documents that show a sustained interest in what was happening at this site. In those years, the United States developed its most advanced reconnaissance aircraft at that time, the U-2. Its first combat mission was precisely Kapustin Yar. Perhaps now these photographs taken from the U-2 are being shown for the first time outside of the CIA. These previously unseen images allow for a detailed examination of the closed military base. By studying the photographs and investigating this site, it became possible to form an understanding of what was happening at the testing grounds. The Russians not only tested missile technology here, but also trained personnel. This facility constantly hosted missile exercises, preparations for tests, and test launches. According to a joint intelligence report from the Navy and Air Force dated December 1, 1960, Kapustin Yar represented a military testing complex covering 3,600 square kilometers. It was characterized as a site of intense interest from intelligence agencies. At that time, it included at least 4 complexes for launching ballistic missiles, 14 launch pads, a precision tracking radar system, and 3 runways. What was once not visible to the U-2 reconnaissance aircraft can now be seen in an exclusive underground journey through a site that may have been the brain center of all Soviet activity in the field of UFOs, a journey through Chitkura. This version, based on reports and drawings by Russian UFO specialist Anton Anfilov, likely represents the first attempt to lift the veil of secrecy over a secret structure that extends 400 meters into the depths of Kapustin Yar. Imagine that you have entered the most secret Russian laboratory dealing with UFOs. There is no grandeur or bright lighting here. Everything is damp, dark, and dirty. The space is divided into numerous isolated rooms, and the laboratory resembles an underground shopping mall. Inside, there are rooms where unusual technologies are disassembled and reassembled. In one of the rooms, to which all corridors lead, post-mortem examinations of alien bodies are conducted. In another room, engines are being reconstructed. There are fantastic machines resembling Rube Goldberg devices designed for testing various components, and finally, you enter huge underground hangars. The first thing that catches the eye is the absence of aircraft. Instead, there are long cigar-shaped cylindrical devices with varying degrees of damage, all of which have crashed. The question arises, was this the very secret place where the wreckage of the crash in the Russian Rosval was stored in 1948? Were the remnants of the Tunguska UFO kept there? Vladimir Semyonov, who worked in the KGB for 26 years, notes that rumors about captured UFOs cannot be disproven. The Soviet Union tried not to leave traces after its secret tests, but they could have stated, yes, we captured some UFOs, we have alien technologies in our hands. However, according to him, it is unclear why they continue to maintain secrecy with such persistence, although other countries are also silent. Semyonov suggests that this guarded experimental facility might have been engaged in reverse engineering UFO technologies to then use them against the United States. If Kapustin Yar is the place where advanced research in rocketry, aviation, armaments, and laser weapons is concentrated, it is quite natural to expect that research on UFOs, including the latest models, is also being conducted there. He adds that in this case, underground bases and protection against aircraft intrusion, especially those like the U-2, are necessary. Another mysterious aspect related to Kapustin Yar is the presence of numerous strange drawings on the ground. Some researchers suggest that Stalin and Korolev, based on strategic considerations, placed these drawings to attract attention to the base. There is an opinion that the Russians might have borrowed this idea from ancient civilizations, whose pyramids were erected in a special geometric order that was supposed to attract inhabitants from other worlds. When viewed from the air, Kapustin Yar reveals many objects and markings that may seem to an untrained observer to have been transferred from another planet. These drawings resemble those that can be seen in South America in the culture of the Maya, or the mysterious circles in sown fields. Semyonov wonders if there is a connection between reports of UFO crashes and the ultra-secret research program. How did the Soviet Union manage to visually demonstrate its achievements in Kapustin Yar? Now, Russian youth have a new significant date, October 4th, the day when the first satellite of Earth was launched. In 1957, as part of the Soviet space program, the successful launch of the first artificial satellite into orbit was accomplished. In the history of our planet, no other event has captured the imagination of such a large number of people as this first step into space. 4 years later, the Russians once again outpaced the Americans by launching Yuri Gagarin, who completed the first orbital flight of a human around the Earth. These two achievements, which propelled the Soviet Union ahead in the fierce competition for space, became landmark moments in history. The Soviet Union was the first, and for the next 10 years, it led the United States in all space endeavors. The first human in space, the first woman in space, the first docking in orbit, all of these occurred before 1981, when the Americans were finally able to launch the shuttle. There are speculations that the Russians utilized every opportunity to replicate technologies that could have been obtained from the Americans, Germans, or even extraterrestrials. The chief Russian specialist on UFOs became a man so legendary that he is recognized simply by his surname, Aja Zha. An American crew is filming the landing site of a UFO for the first time, which became popular at the peak of interest in UFOs in the Soviet Union during the late 60s and 70s. At that time, discussing this topic was neither prohibited nor encouraged. Aja Zha invited the filming crew from the channel Hysteria on an exclusive tour to the site where another UFO crash allegedly occurred, located near the so-called Russian Roswell, known for the events of 1948. Using 2 copper rods, he begins to check the surrounding energy field, which remains unfavorable at the crash site. Here it is, a negative sign. Right there, over there. This is where the flying saucer landed, he says, confidently pointing to the ground. He continues, then I will walk across, then I will walk diagonally. I am heading to the center. Here is the center. In this center, lush vegetation is visible, and most importantly, the rods show a positive signal. Aja Zha continues his investigation. Let's go further to determine the boundary. Here the rods are neutral. The second part of the boundary, from here to there. He walks around a cigar-shaped outline measuring 30 by 6 meters, suggesting that a UFO made an emergency landing here in 1961. Positive, positive, very positive, look how it spins, very positive, he adds, recording his observations. He notes, yes, that is, this is an unknown energy that, as you show, negatively affects a person. The pulse changes, the heartbeat increases, shortness of breath appears, sweating occurs. It is harmful to stay longer. Let's go from here to a normal environment, where no unknown forces affect us. His account of the crash is corroborated by a resident of the nearby village of Skodnia. She shares her version of the appearance of the UFO that she saw from the window of her house, located less than 200 meters from the site of the incident. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and suddenly my mom screamed, "Look at that sphere. What a sphere is flying, such a big one, it must be a saucer. Look, a big, fiery red sphere is flying." It was coming from over there, across the railway and descending into the valley of the Sukisi River. Experts and colleagues of Ajaji believe that events like this crash, as well as the crash of 1948, have opened Pandora's box over Kapustin Yar, provoking what some call a war in the sky over Russia. They were receiving commands from the Earth, which were also guarding their airspaces, or the UFO was going in for a terrifying attack, notes one of the researchers. The most interesting aspects of these stories are the aerial battles with UFOs. I have read several testimonies about this, some of which detailed articles about the battles, and it is very interesting, says one of the experts. Perhaps the most convincing evidence of encounters between Soviet MiGs and UFOs over Kapustin Yar can be obtained firsthand from the most famous of Soviet test pilots, Marina Popovich. She, a national hero and test pilot, recounts that she herself witnessed battles between Soviet pilots and UFOs. In 1964, during a training operation of the Soviet Air Force, a squadron commander and flight instructor, flying with a cadet, encountered an unexpected attack by an unidentified object. Later, in February 1980, Colonel Popovich, participating in a secret military expedition, encountered numerous unidentified objects in the sky over Russia. He described them as stunning 3 lights forming a triangle. These events were recorded in a book, which also mentioned how the objects evaded them. Another test pilot, Colonel Vyatkin Lev Mikhailovich, agreed for the first time to give an interview. He recounted the incident of August 17, 1967, when his MiG was unexpectedly captured in the air by an unidentified flying object. Vyatkin was performing a left turn when a large disc flared above him. He managed to level the aircraft, but the wing of the plane shook, and the instruments began to flicker. Colonel Vyatkin noticed that the wing of his aircraft was glowing, and to figure this out, he ordered it to be washed with kerosene. Fortunately for Colonel Vyatkin, his encounter with an unidentified object over Kapustin Yar in the 60s did not end as tragically as the well-known collision of 1948 in the same skies. He was puzzled, particularly struck by the fact that the beam emanating from the object turned out to be solid. While reports from citizens and military personnel continued to pour into the government, the KGB was busy concealing the facts, forcing witnesses to remain silent and imposing bans on publications. The intelligence services prepared an official report on UFO activity in the USSR, known as the Blue Folder of the KGB. As one of the experts noted, Americans would never understand this. To grasp the power of the KGB, one had to be inside that organization. During Stalin's time, the KGB wielded incredible power. The Blue Folder compiled and studied materials over a span of 20 years, from the mid-60s to the mid-80s. This document became the result of one of the largest investigations into UFOs and consists of 124 pages, access to which was opened in 1990. Many are convinced that this is not all that the KGB had. The Blue Folder contains thousands of reports on UFO sightings, their interactions with the military, and the crashes of these objects, all described in minute detail. According to the documents of the Blue Folder, on the 21st of March 1990, between 10 and 11:30 in the evening, residents of dozens of Russian cities located near Kapustin Yar witnessed the appearance of a UFO. In one written report by a KGB officer, it was noted that a significant number of residents from the surrounding cities observed the appearance of a UFO. in some cases even two objects. One eyewitness described how a beam of light emanated from the object, illuminating the Earth's surface. Given the multitude of rumors and discussions about UFOs, the government sooner or later had to turn to its special services with the question, "What is happening?" Explain. That is why the KGB was forced to create this folder with testimonies from witnesses who truly saw something or believed they had seen something. Some wondered whether the incident of 1990 could have been a routine test launch from Kapustin Yar or if it was yet another incident related to UFOs. Had the Soviet Union not collapsed in the early 90s, perhaps the chilling testimonies of first-degree contacts in and around Kapustin Yar would have remained yet another dangerous secret of the Soviet era. Over time, much has changed. If we talk to the older generation, then, of course, there can be no conversations on this topic. But nowadays, everything is absolutely different. The younger generation lives in a different society and believes that they have much more freedom. This new freedom in Russia has helped the producers of the program obtain Soviet military footage through official channels, which you will hear now. In the 1950s and 60s, Soviet military personnel faced a number of accidents during the launch and testing of rockets. At the secret base, disasters followed one after another. The question remained, were these ordinary incidents or retaliatory attacks by UFOs? Among the many rumors, one of them caught attention. It was said that 4 Soviet launch vehicles were blown up on their launch pads by aliens, as the Russians continued to attempt to shoot down flying saucers. In the footage that was hidden for 45 years, a Soviet military operator captured the wreckage of 2 UFOs in the form of fireballs. Reportedly, they crashed at Kapustin Yar early in the morning of the 3rd of June 1960. No one not associated with the military or the KGB would ever have known what was recorded on this tape. The screams of 3 firefighters can be heard as they escaped from a massive fireball that, according to reports, continued to expand, causing new powerful explosions in the area for an hour. It is believed that one of the UFOs destroyed 3 Soviet rockets on their launch pads, while the other struck a rocket fuel storage facility and obliterated it. All of this happened just a few meters from Zhitkur, an underground facility engaged in UFO research. The remnants of the 2 alleged UFOs that survived the incident were quickly transported from the base to Zhitkur. Imagining that Earth for aliens might be an undeveloped colony, one can assume that they need our resources. Just as the United States and the Soviet Union fought over various regions, so too might aliens be fighting for land, just as the USA and the USSR conflicted over power. During Stalin's time and immediately after, discussing such topics was forbidden. No one was allowed to speak about it. During that period, even attempting to discuss such issues could land one in prison or exiled to Siberia. Can all these UFO sightings and the presented evidence of their existence be logically explained? Do these strange events really happen in Russia? Yes, believes Kim Murphy, a reporter for the largest American newspaper. In May 2005, the news that a certain lake located 3 hours' drive from Moscow had simply vanished reached the Moscow bureau of the Los Angeles Times. Kim Murphy went to the site upon hearing about the mysterious disappearance. She noted, "I do not believe this story. It cannot happen." However, when she arrived at the location several days later, on the front page of the newspaper dated May 27, 2005, she described how she discovered a huge hole in the ground. The only person who witnessed what happened described the lake's disappearance as a terrifying vortex, as the water quickly sank underground, leaving only a dent. Vanishing lakes, fireballs in the sky, reports of cigar-shaped UFO attacks. Russia continues to be a country of incredible mysteries. Secret operations in Kapustin Yar and Zhitkur continue to this day, and the base remains a kind of lightning rod for UFOs. According to one researcher, another crash occurred in Kapustin Yar in 1989, and in 1997, debris from a UFO crash in Poland was delivered to Kapustin Yar for analysis. Recent political moves by Russian President Vladimir Putin have led some in the West to accuse his government of erecting a new Iron Curtain. Observing the situation, some people are becoming increasingly concerned, believing that Putin's Russia is a more authoritarian state than Yeltsin's Russia. Kim Murphy emphasizes that information about UFOs today comes from Russia, with much more difficulty than it did several years ago. In an open society, there is no way to control state secrets. Putin, a former KGB officer, watches as a wealth of valuable information and technology leaks into other hands. Russia is becoming an increasingly closed country, especially regarding issues related to UFOs. The veil of secrecy over the underground laboratory and storage facility in this legendary Russian zone known as Area 51 may remain impenetrable for a long time. We are only beginning to unravel the mysterious story of Russian Roswell. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and as the saying goes, to see is to believe.